Imagine with me for a second that you're standing at the back of a chapel during a funeral. And at the very front of the room, there's a casket, a minister or a priest standing behind it, and there are 3 people lined up at the microphone. As you walk down the center aisle at the chapel toward the open casket, you can see that the 3 people lined up at the microphone are people you know very well. And they know you, although they can't see you. One of them is a close family member, maybe a sibling of yours or a parent. One of them is your closest friend. And one of them is your teacher, maybe a professor or a boss from work. And as you approach the open casket and look inside, perhaps you're completely freaked out to see that it's you. This is your funeral. And those 3 people lined up behind the microphone are about to say something about you. What do you think they'll say? How will they sum up your life? What are they going to say that they're going to miss most about you? In other words, what do you hope your life will have been about? This is the thought experiment that Dr. Stephen Covey uses as an opening illustration in one of his books, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the purpose is to get you to consider what it is that your life is building towards. It's about intentionality. It's about beginning with the end in mind. And the real question is to ask myself, are the behaviors, the activities, are my relationships, the habits that I have now, or the things I'm doing now taking me in a direction that would make people speak well at my funeral? This isn't just a question about the end of your life either. You can apply this to any stage. I mean, what would you like your life to be about when you're 20 or when you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s? And is what you're doing now taking you in that direction? Around my 30th birthday, Alana and I were sitting in the living room asking ourselves that question. What would we like our life to look like when we're 40? I'll spare you most of the details, but one of the things that I said was that I want to have the energy, the enthusiasm, and the strength to play with our kids. I wanted to have a level of fitness that could match their level of fun and excitement. But my lifestyle back then wasn't going to get me there. I did a quick Google search, how to lose weight without giving up beer and fried food. I started reading, doing a little research, talking to some friends who work out regularly, wondering, contemplating, and even planning what a possible workout schedule could look like. But here's the truth, and you know this. It's actually doing it that makes the difference. It's action that actually matters, right? I mean, it's one thing to contemplate and consider and wonder and research and plan. It's doing it that'll make all the difference. I mean, think about your own life. On the grand scale, what does the end look like? Who's going to be lined up at the microphone, and what do you hope they'll say about how you treated people you didn't know, or how you handled stress and pressure in life, or how you behaved when you were hungry, or how you handled money, how you raised your children, how you served or didn't serve others? And then the really tough question is what you're doing now. Is your attitude now, is your behavior now, are your relationships now, are your habits now taking you in that direction? There's this ancient book of poems in the middle of the Bible called the Psalms, and it opens up with a poem that gives a picture of this idea. It says, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yield fruit in its season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers." To use the poet's image, your roots now will determine your fruit later. You can do your research, you can contemplate, wonder, and even plan where you're going to be planted. You can plan where you're going to take root. You can plan how you're going to raise your kids or handle your finances or behave when you're hungry. But this is the rub. It's actually doing it that makes the difference. It's doing it now that makes the difference later. Now, if you're wondering to yourself, well, what does any of this have to do with Jesus? I thought this channel was supposed to be about helping people follow Jesus. The answer is, he taught this. In full disclosure, I'm convinced that if you follow Jesus on this, you're going to end up living the life you perhaps never knew you actually always wanted. But it's doing it that's going to make the difference. Not just reading about him or wondering about Jesus or criticizing other people who say they follow Jesus or criticizing people who don't. It's actually putting his words into practice that makes all the difference in the world. At the very end of one of his most famous teachings, Jesus said this: "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rains came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash." You see, up until this point in his teaching, Jesus had been rewriting what it looks like to live a godly life, to live the good life. And there were moments in his teaching when people cheered because of the liberating beauty of his words and how he talked about this new gracious God. And there were moments when people groaned, maybe even walked away from him while he was talking because of the amazingly high standard it seemed like Jesus kept calling people to. But at the end of it all, he said, "Okay, don't just listen to this. Go and live it." He was inviting people to action. In fact, he was so intent on that action that he said to not do so is to be a fool, a word that he actually condemned the use of just a few minutes earlier in the same message. You see, for Jesus, a fool is a person who doesn't begin with the end in mind. The storm's going to come, and we'd all like to build the kind of life that can withstand it, but the question is, look at your life. Look at how you operate in relationships with others, with yourself, with God, whatever that means to you. Look at your habits, your rhythms. Is it all contributing to a house built on rock or a house built on sand? Jesus says to hear my words and then not do them is like saying you want to have the kind of life that can withstand the apocalyptic storm, but then you go ahead and build it on the beach. I mean, that's foolish, that's dumb. It's like asking how you can lose weight without drinking less beer or eating less fried food. Instead, everyone who hears these words of mine and does them, lives them, is building a foundation that can withstand anything this life has to throw at them. That's wisdom. In other words, it's actually doing it that makes the difference. Jesus had a younger brother named James. He preached the same message in one of the letters that he wrote to Christians scattered throughout the Roman Empire in the first century. He said, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but doesn't do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like." See, you use a mirror to see what you look like. Make sure your hair's not askew or that your makeup's done right. You look into the mirror to be sure that your clothes fit. You look into the mirror to make sure you've dressed yourself according to the way that you were hoping to look that day. If you look in the mirror and you see that your hair is a disaster or that your shirt doesn't fit, and then you walk away and you do nothing about that, well then what's the point of looking in the mirror? Hearing Jesus' teaching but not doing it? It's like looking in a mirror and forgetting that you had ketchup stains on your shirt and not changing. It's action that actually matters. A few sentences later, James says, "Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after widows and orphans in their distress." This idea of religion was brand new for everybody who was reading James's letter. Religion was supposed to be about ritual. You showed your devotion to the divine by attending a temple, by making sacrifices, by giving offering, by praying the right way, the right amount of times during the day, and offering the right gifts. But James, because of his brother Jesus, redefined devotion. Devotion to the divine, says James, is doing. And if you're wondering to yourself, well, why should I care what Jesus' younger brother James says? I think that's a really great question. The reason that I find what James says so compelling is because he didn't always think this way. He used to think Jesus was crazy. He tried to have him apprehended at one point. I mean, wouldn't you, if your brother started saying he was one with God, talking about a kingdom that's not of this world? James thought he was crazy. And his suspicions were confirmed when Jesus was eventually crucified for the things that he was talking about. But it all changed when he saw Jesus risen from the dead. James became such a devoted follower of his own brother that he ended up playing a major role in the spread of the first century church, a church that ended up changing the world. And how did that change happen? How did that change come about? The devotion to doing. Not just wondering, not just reading, not just listening, but it was doing what Jesus said that made all the difference, which I think should give us some pause. I mean, Jesus said that anyone who wanted to build a life that can withstand anything this existence has to throw at it should simply put his words into practice. And so I guess the question for us to ponder is, what kind of life are you building? James' definition of pure religion being about loving orphans and widows, I mean, that's a life that challenges me. I fall short of that. I need grace for that. Now, the heart of the Christian faith is that Jesus gave his life for people like you and me, for people who fall short. You don't have to earn his love. That's not what this is about. In fact, the grace of God is opposed to earning, but it's not opposed to effort. Devotion is doing, and sometimes doing takes effort intentionally, not to earn God's love, but as a response to God's love. So, over the next couple of videos, what we're going to do is look at the teachings of Jesus, but we're not going to just listen to them, we're actually going to live them. I mean, Jesus spent 3 years on earth teaching and saying a lot of things, but the truth is, there are really 5 areas that he spent most of his time talking about. Now, you don't have to be a Christian to do this. You don't have to be a scholar or a Bible thumper. This isn't something that's just for parents or just for adults or just for married people. This is quite literally for everyone. And the reason I know it's for everyone is because Jesus said, everyone who puts these words of mine into practice. Corey, who is everyone? It's everyone. Even them. Even you. My hope is that together as we follow Jesus, you might just find the life you've always wanted. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Oh, and did you know that 55% of people who watch our videos aren't subscribed? If that's you, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That's gonna let you know whenever we put out new videos, and it's gonna let us know that you're here. And let me tell you, we're so glad that you're here. All right, we'll see you next time.